Sorry for running late today, everybody, but welcome to DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans presented by Kroger. Glad to have you with us. I'm in a great mood. Today's going to be a really good show. We're going to stomp out some haters on today's program. Always love doing that. We have one of our best ever Gator Hater Roll Call Golden Shoe winners on today's program. I may have a little bit of a surprise for Monday's show, too, related to kind of some of this kind of stuff. I'll tell you more about that then. I've been trying to get it together for a couple of days and just has not quite come together. But we may have some fun with that later on. One piece of, I guess, unfortunate news is that I'm probably going to have to, I don't know, kind of come clean on a couple rumors for Georgia that don't seem to quite be materializing the way that I hope they would be, at least at this point. We'll talk about that. Jeff Sentel on UGA recruiting. That's going to be a really good time, so buckle up. Glad to have you with us. Fun ride here for the next few minutes. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So, before we get too deep into today's content, let me just say this. I love Mark Richt. I'd put my love for Mark Richt up against anyone's, really. I've gone so far as to say that there ought to be something around Georgia like to honor Richt. Like, you don't put his name on the stadium or anything like that. He didn't win a national championship, but he did win at Georgia an awful lot. And one of my favorite sporting memories as a fan of the sport was back in 2002 when I was just old enough to have some money, but still just young enough not to have very many responsibilities. And, I was going around, following that team every game, it seemed like. I probably made 9-10 games that year. Just had a great time cheering for Georgia back during that era. Very proud of the Richt accomplishments. Those were special times for me as a fan. I love Mark Richt. I feel the need to say that again. However, let me tell you what I don't love. I do not love anytime someone, and typically this is the media, I do not like anytime someone tries to use Mark Richt to disparage Kirby Smart, because frankly I think those comparisons are probably pretty stupid. And it's appropriate for us to kind of get into that today here for a couple of minutes. Now, what I don't want our Friday show to be is kind of a repository for whatever news we didn't get to earlier in the week, but sometimes it seems like that has kind of happened. An example of that, the other day, Booger McFarland, another guy who I kind of also like, and frankly I feel absolutely betrayed here, because when the world was trashing McFarland for being an awful Monday Night Football analyst, I'd come to his defense and say that he was fine. This was all, kind of Twitter hysteria. I've defended Booger McFarland many times on this show as a better analyst than sometimes he's given credit for. And Booger McFarland pays back that love on my part to him by going on the Paul Feinbaum show. This is actually a few days old by now, but he goes on the Paul Feinbaum show the other day and just, I don't want to say trashes Kirby Smart. That may be a little strong here, but he really took Smart to task for what has happened for Smart in his first 5 years on the job at Georgia, and as I said before, in a way that I find totally distasteful, used a Mark Richt comparison to do so. I don't like what Booger McFarland's about to say, but I do think it's important for us to retort it. So retort it, whatever the way that phrase is supposed to work. Let me let you hear Booger with Feinbaum, and that'll set us up for where we want to go today.
Here's what I'll say about Georgia. And I played against Kirby Smart. Like, Kirby is from my era. Kirby has done an outstanding job of recruiting to Georgia. But if you're going to be honest and you're a Bulldog fan and you're going to sit there and you're going to stare honesty in the eye, Kirby has done less with more maybe than Mark Richt. And to me, that's an issue, because you fired Mark Richt because you got tired of 10 wins. You fired Mark Richt because you got tired of coming up second. Well, Kirby hasn't quite gotten you over the hump. It's looked different. It sounded different. But what does he have to show? And I know it's unfair because Tua threw to Devontae Smith. Otherwise, Kirby's a national champion. But you know the old saying, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. So Kirby, for as much talent and as fast as he's built the Georgia program, he's got to get something to show for it. And in the sport of football, it's about rings. And so far, he hasn't been able to do that.
So let me deal with something I think that McFarland gets factually wrong, and then we will talk about something that obviously McFarland probably is factually correct about, and that'll kind of just sort of set us up for everything here. I think that Booger is flat wrong when he says that Kirby Smart has no hardware. Now, when he says he has no ring, he's obviously referencing a national championship, and listen, Georgia fans all know that's true. We've all talked about that many times. That is a hump that Georgia still needs to get over. But this is kind of the problem sometimes with talking about college football in 2021, that we act like the only thing that exists is the national championship, and the only thing that exists is the college football playoff that produces that national champion. Now, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this. That is the ultimate prize in the sport, and when you're as resourced a program as Georgia is, you ought to aspire for national championships, and less than that is not good enough. But, as I've said on previous shows, measuring progress is important. It's not just one team is a success, 129 teams are a failure, because if that's all that it was, you'd never be able to tell who was trending in the right direction and who's not. And clearly, Smart has some hardware to point to a positive trend. Smart did win the SEC in 2017. I'm not telling you that's as equal to winning a national championship, but it is something, because look at how many teams in the SEC, the Floridas, the Tennessees, the teams you want to point to, power program like Texas A&M, who's never won it since being here in 2012. Look at all the programs that have long droughts of winning SEC titles. The fact that Georgia's won one within the last couple of years is actually a tangible accomplishment. It's not the ultimate accomplishment, but it is a tangible accomplishment. We've seen Florida go on a victory lap for the last few, what seems like a couple months, because they won the SEC East. Apparently, Florida thinks winning the SEC East is a big deal, and prior to that, Georgia had won it 3 years in a row. So is that a tangible accomplishment or not? If it's not, then you can give Dan Mullen no credit for doing anything, but if it is, then you've got to give Kirby Smart credit for having it done the 3 years before that. I'm not telling you that you ought to be satisfied, because obviously you want to win a national championship, but Booger McFarland is wrong when he says there is no hardware in the trophy case for Georgia. There's a Rose Bowl title, there's an SEC title, there's 3 straight trips to the SEC championship game. There is some stuff to suggest that Kirby Smart has had success with the recruits that he's brought in there to UGA. Now, however, on the other side of this, the thing that that McFarland may seem factually accurate on is a comparison between Kirby Smart and Mark Richt. This suggestion that you brought in Kirby to be better than Richt, and so far the numbers kind of bear that out. This gets a lot of attention because through 5 years, at least on paper, these numbers do kind of track alongside each other. ESPN put this out during the season, near the end of the season, that at the time of the tweeting here in December, that Richt had been 51-13, that Kirby Smart had been 50-14, around the same record. Both coaches had won 3 SEC East titles in their first 5 years in the job. Richt, though, had won 2 SEC titles. Smart's obviously got just the one. And as far as like the bowl game wins, which is kind of an arbitrary thing to compare, they give Richt 5 of those and Kirby 4 of those. Let's don't worry about bowl game wins, because that's kind of, like I said, kind of an arbitrary comparison. But the clear, easily measurable things like winning SEC championships, Richt did do more in his first 5 years. They essentially won, very close to the same number of games, and they won exactly the same number of SEC East titles. So on just like the basic, kind of gut level facts, it seems like they are very much the same kind of coach. But here's what I'm going to tell you, that things are actually a little bit different than might appear, for a couple of reasons here. First of all, there's this. And listen, this is not meant to disparage what has gone on with Mark Richt during his tenure at Georgia. I loved it as a fan. I appreciate it as a analyst, or whatever you want to say there. But there is something very interesting that happened for Richt after his first 5 years in the job that did include 3 trips in the SEC championship game, winning the SEC twice. What happened in 2006? The SEC changed forever, right? Because in the first 5 years of the Richt era, how many national championships did the SEC win? It's just the one, right? LSU in 2003. That was the SEC's national championship during that run. Auburn could have won it in 2004. They were undefeated, but you understand what I'm saying here. But think about 2006. The SEC changed forever at that point in time. Florida won it in 06, LSU won it in 07. Florida won it again in 2008, Alabama in 2009, Auburn in 2010, Alabama again in 2011. You go on this long run of SEC national championships. And that's kind of the SEC that Kirby eventually inherited, because once the SEC started producing a national champion year after year after year, honesty compels me to admit, the Richt record started to recede just a bit. In fact, if you want to make the 5-year comparison between Richt and Smart in their first 5 years in the job, it's also important to note year 6. In that year, Mark Richt's Georgia Bulldogs went 9-4. Do you think there's any chance that Kirby Smart in Georgia loses 4 games this year? Goodness, I hope that's not the case, but I would suggest, given the way that Smart has recruited, given the track record of how he's performed in these games with talent he brings back for this upcoming season, the notion that Smart could lose 4 games this upcoming year, to me, seems like a remote possibility. I'm not bagging on Richt. I'm not trying to trash his resume, but the idea that Richt and Smart are going to track alongside each other, I would suggest the next 5 years is the time in which that's going to start to become less and less true. But no matter what kind of facts I want to kind of throw back up to kind of retort what Booger McFarland said, the truth is that human beings are not rational creatures. Human beings are emotional creatures. So let me make an emotional appeal for why a comparison between Richt and Smart doesn't actually work out as well as maybe some in the media think that it does. There was a lot of respect for Richt when he was at Georgia. I had respect for him. You had respect for him. Even people who were not Georgia fans had respect for him. But how much fear was there really? How many fans of other SEC programs were scared of what Richt was going to do? That he was going to build something at Georgia that would allow the Bulldogs just to kind of run off and hide and lap the field, to mix metaphors, around the SEC. It could have happened for Richt. It didn't quite happen, and I don't know that opposing SEC fans were all that worried that it was going to. But look at the emotion that has always surrounded Kirby Smart. Alabama fans have hated Smart with a white-hot passion ever since he left Tuscaloosa. Remember, we played the audio of John Parker Wilson earlier this week saying that he wasn't scared of Kirby, he was scared of Jeremy Pruitt. One of the best ways to know what most men are afraid of is to listen to how often they try to explain to you how much they're not afraid of something. And I think that JPW probably reflected a lot of the feelings of many Alabama fans about that, because whatever Nick Saban is as a coach, he's only going to be it for a few more years. Whatever Kirby Smart is as a coach, he has a chance to be that at Georgia for another 20 years. And if he's building up something as big as it looks like it could be through the first 5 years on the job, that is indeed something to maybe be a little worried about, maybe be a little afraid of. Something else that I think kind of points to some of the fear that a lot of SEC fans have about Georgia is the desperate desire to connect UGA to this NCAA scandal going on at Tennessee that does involve Amarius Mims, a player that ended up signing at Georgia. But you see this desperate attempt to say, well, it's really Georgia the NCAA is going to come after here. We played the audio earlier this week of the radio host Dan Patrick trying to do that on the basis of some source. There was a Birmingham TV station this week that brought on Trey Wallace, a Tennessee reporter, to kind of talk about the Tennessee situation. And also there's this attempt by the TV host, her name is Simone Eli, to try to kind of bring Georgia into this discussion. The Tennessee reporter, all willing to kind of do that as well. This is the kind of emotion that Georgia seems to conjure up. In fact, let me let you hear this from Channel 42 in Birmingham earlier this week.
So following up quick, you mentioned the kid that signed with Georgia. Does this now shift the attention to Georgia and Kirby Smart? Should it? Has it? Will it?
I think that when you have a situation where Tennessee is looking at, and by the way, the NCAA has formally been on the case now for about 2 weeks. So the fact that the NCAA now knows and has asked Jeremy Pruitt and other assistant coaches questions about Amarius Mims, I promise you now Georgia will be on the radar of the NCAA.
I joked with our video audience yesterday that the NCAA is coming for Georgia is about to be the new QAnon conspiracy of SEC fans, that the FBI is about to raid the Georgia facility and there's going to be mass arrests and Philip Fulmer is going to be instituted as SEC commissioner for life, that folks seem just so desperate to bring Georgia down a peg. I would suggest that's on the basis of fear. Mark Richt had respect. Kirby Smart, I believe, has fear. Fear from opposing fan bases, fear from other league programs. And if you want to look for the reason why Smart and Richt maybe truly be different, that emotion in and of itself may be the only proof that you need. The Mark Richt era was really, really good at Georgia. Even after 5 years of Kirby Smart on the job, I still believe the Smart era is eventually going to be better. In fact, I think some of that would be proven in 2021. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Good to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. and, of course, all across the podcast platforms as well. No matter how you get to us today, we're really glad to have you with us, and really appreciate our friends at Kroger for making it all possible. You know, Kroger's got big deals for you as you get ready for the Super Bowl party here this year. I know a lot of you getting excited about that, doing some fun stuff with that. Well, make sure you turn to Kroger for everything you need there, whether it be party platters, decorations, beverages, whatever you're doing for your Super Bowl celebration, you can get that with our friends at Kroger. Not too early to start thinking about that, with conference championship games on tap for Sunday, and then, of course, the big game coming up a couple weeks after that. Go ahead and be thinking about all of that going down with our friends at Kroger. We're going to get Jeff Sentel here coming up in just a moment. We're going to talk a lot with him about UJ recruiting. Some of the stuff we're going to get into is, we kind of talked about Terry Arnold earlier in this week and how he may or may not be impacted by Charlton Warren's departure as Georgia defensive backs coach. We'll let Jeff kind of fill us in some more details on that when he joins us in a moment. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse, delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And listen, we never really pretend to be an objective show. We are obviously a show for Georgia Bulldogs fans, but to a degree, it is important for us to be fair and balanced, that if I'm going to drag onto the show every possible rumor that could potentially, help Georgia, I should also probably point out sometimes when those rumors are, I don't want to say fizzling out because that may not be quite true. I'll say it this way. When it comes to some of the big hot transfer names, potential transfer names, boy, if you really listen right now, that dog is just not barking at the moment. That doesn't mean that a Rick Gilbert might not still land at Georgia. He very well might. We talked a little bit about Elias Ricks yesterday. It's kind of important to note that that's just not really getting off the ground right now. Let me give you a couple of examples of this. I know many of you, especially this time of year, maybe you get a little bit behind on the show. I hope you'll listen to the full show from yesterday, because late at the end of my conversation with Terrence Edwards, and also, by the way, great appearance yesterday by Georgia basketball coach Tom Crean, who just knocked it out of the park when he stopped by to see us yesterday. But with Terrence Edwards, we kind of got into the Rick Gilbert situation late in the show, or late in my interview with him. Terrence knows Rick very well, and he shared his insight on that. I hope you'll listen to the full thing, because we talked about the possibility of maybe he'll even stay at LSU maybe. But this is what Terrence said yesterday on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger, about the Rick Gilbert situation. Let's hear this.
The young man right now is just trying to take his time, trying to figure out and navigate himself through this whole process, and just trying to make the best decision for him. He's, already chose LSU once, and he's just looking for a home that's going to mature him as a man on and off the field. And I don't have a timetable when it's going to be, but I know right now he's just taking a approach that he has to get this right on the field and off the field.
So my big takeaway from what Terrence said on the show yesterday, a guy who knows Rick Gilbert very well, says, I don't have a timetable for when this decision is going to come. And the longer it waits, the more you wonder, well, is this really going to happen for Georgia? This rumor that, goodness knows, I've done everything I can to kind of fan the flames on. Maybe that's just not happening for right now, or maybe if it is going to happen, it's going to happen much later. I also brought up Elias Ricks yesterday and some of the stuff that he had been tweeting that makes you think, well, maybe he is unhappy in Baton Rouge, and maybe he really is, looking to leave. This is a former elite cornerback, very impressive, guy in his first year on campus there for LSU. A big need for Georgia, and it's easy for people who do what I do for a living to kind of try to take this, square peg and stick it in that square hole of Georgia needs a defensive back. This is a good one. Rick's is friends with a couple of guys on the Georgia roster, so it kind of works out just perfectly for UGA. Unfortunately, though, at least for right now, that doesn't seem like it's really happening either. I mentioned yesterday what an Ohio State reporter that I trust had kind of said about maybe a connection between Ricks and the Buckeyes. Let me give you a little taste of audio here from Jeremy Birmingham, who's been a guest on our show before, covers Ohio State recruiting. This is from a podcast that he did, and I'll put a link to the full podcast when I put the show up here at DawgNation.com, plus the full Booger McFarland interview and all the kind of stuff that you've heard on today's show. I'll give you links to all of it. But as far as what the thought process on Ricks is right now from a non-Georgia partisan, from someone who's, connected to a different program, this is what Jeremy Birmingham said about Elias Ricks.
There are other players who are not in the transfer portal that are constantly being talked about, it seems like, in the dark web of the internet, okay? So one of those is Elias Ricks, cornerback at LSU, who is being now again, and this happened about a month and a half ago, actually, where people started to have this idea that Elias was going to be leaving LSU, and that Ohio State and USC are the two schools to really watch if he was able to move on, if he decided to move on. I know that there's rumblings that he is not entirely thrilled with life in Baton Rouge, with everything that's gone on with the program.
So there you go. So a respected recruiting reporter saying, yes, there are rumblings that Ricks isn't happy at LSU, and maybe that means he's on the move. But if he is, maybe it's more like the Ohio State, USC variety here. The word Georgia does not come up there in that discussion. So do with that what you will. Honesty at times compels me to admit that a couple of things that maybe we've tried to speak into existence around here, something like a Ricks, something like a Gilbert, at least for now, all quiet, it would seem, on that front. It's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza, America's most beloved pizza. Real, authentic pizza made the Italian way and made with great care as well. Listen, I think we all kind of are a little bit more aware these days of kind of how our food is prepared, the people that have like the mask like sagging down, below their mouth or something like that. Well, at Marco's Pizza, they take great care to make sure that your pizza is well taken care of. They bake it in a 450-degree oven. Then after that, it's contactless and touchless, delivered right to you. So you have great peace of mind about the food that you're serving to your family. That's a great thing. You can also get great savings as well. Large specialty pizza right now, plus a 2-topping pizza, large pizza, just $23.99. You're talking about settling in to watch some football this weekend. That's a great pairing with that. Great deal from Marco's. Find them online, marcos.com, or use the Marco's app for a great opportunity to enjoy some Marco's pizza, and it's great to have them delivering Around the Doghouse to us here today. All right, we have a lot of ground to cover on our program. There's big news on a couple of different SEC fronts, including a little bit more on the Tennessee turmoil, what Vols fans believe might be an end coming to that. So we'll talk about that coming up in a moment. But first, on everything involving UGA recruiting, including the latest on the 4-star defensive back Terrion Arnold, let's go on the road with Jeff Sentel, assisted by AAA.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So last week we went like a half an hour with Jeff Sentel during this spot. I'm going to try not to take quite so much of his time up today, especially since I'm pretty late getting to him compared to a normal interview. But nonetheless, it is good to be with Jeff Sentel on the road, assisted by AAA. And Jeff, as I mentioned, I want to talk about Terrion Arnold and some of that stuff coming up. But let me bring you in on the conversation I was just having. And I don't take great pleasure in doing this because there's nobody who loves kind of, getting knee deep in the rumor mill more so than me, and imagining the possibilities of who might be coming to Georgia and when they might be getting here and, everything else. It's just kind of fun to do that. We like having fun around here. But admittedly, the dog doesn't quite seem to be barking too much lately with a Rick Gilbert, who, as Terrence Edwards said yesterday, could be kind of a while before he makes any kind of decision about his future. Elias Ricks, admittedly, if that defensive back leaves LSU, it's probably an Ohio State or a USC that's a little bit more of an attractive destination for him. I don't take pleasure in saying that these transfer, pipe dreams aren't exactly coming to fruition, but I guess it's my job to admit when it's true. And it seems like in these two situations right now, there's not a lot happening in the way of UGA at the moment. Is that fair to say?
I just think it's good morning, Brendan. I just think it's different, man. I think it's like, let's look at the last 4 or 5 years of Kirby recruiting. There was at least a little juice left in January. Like, some years it was George Pickens. Last year it was a kind of a triumvirate of what was Cedric Von Prawn going to do? What was Broderick Jones still going to do? There was a lot of juice there, a lot of high schoolish juice. But like this year, you've got 20 signees, 16 of them are on campus. And really, it's just Terrion Arnold for the 2021 class. And it's just a different recruiting cycle when, as you just kind of dialogued right there, more of your attention, or maybe your wayward eyes, are towards the portal rather than the tried and true 2021 recruit. But lo and behold, Brendan, if Terrion Arnold didn't try to give you something to talk about this week by having all those pictures of him in a Georgia ball cap all over his Instagram, he was trying to catch your attention,
sure.
Brendan. I know he was.
No doubt about that. Let me kind of finish this before we get to the Arnold stuff. In that, listen, I'd love, a guy like Elias Ricks to come to Georgia if he were to transfer. It's important to know that he's not even in the transfer portal for LSU. A Rick Gilbert is in the transfer portal, but we don't know what he's going to do. I'd love for him to come to Georgia there as well, but I don't think any name like that, nor like another big name that's out there like Henry Toto, who's about to leave Tennessee, who I don't think is going to have probably any connection to Georgia. I don't see a transfer name out there that's an absolutely must-have, must-get for Georgia. This isn't the situation a year ago, in other words, where you're bringing in a Jamie Newman because you didn't have a quarterback, or you're bringing in, a couple years ago, a Tyler Catalina because you didn't have 5 starting offensive linemen. Georgia's obviously got need at defensive back, but not a must-have in the transfer portal. Rick Gilbert, I think, is one of the real true special playmakers potentially in college football, but it's not like there aren't other people who could potentially do that kind of stuff for UGA this upcoming season. That's at least, I think, fair to kind of point out.
Yeah, Brennan, I guess, I don't know, since we're dabbling in the sandbox today, who would you think would be more viable, a 5-star tight end talent from the transfer portal or a 5-star cornerback talent from the transfer portal? I would probably argue the latter rather than the former.
Well, I'm a best available type guy, and so that's why I would favor Gilbert, because it's kind of like the NFL draft. It doesn't matter what you need. There are certain players, if they're available, you just pick them because they're that good. And I just am a little bit of a Rick Gilbert homer in that I just think he's really, really good. And I don't deny that defensive back is more of a need for Georgia. But part of the reason why we've talked about Gilbert as much as we have, even with very little tangible proof that he might even be connected to Georgia, is frankly just because I just think he's that good, or at least he has the potential to be that good. Saw a lot of him on film from high school because Marietta's not too far from here, so you get a chance to see more of him than maybe some of the other guys that we kind of talk about from time to time. And he just looked really good every time I saw him. Now he was playing a good offense, had an SEC quarterback throwing the ball to him, which is a little bit of a built-in advantage. But, part of my thing about Gilbert is not that Georgia needs him. It's just that I kind of want him.
Brandon, let's do a little quick to be continued from our cover 4 last night. This is cover really more. We had that discussion thread where we discussed who's the former 5-star that Georgia needs to play like an All-American. I think the name Darnell Washington probably should have been mentioned there as well, because goodness gracious, if you got Darnell Washington playing like an All-American tight end next season, then a lot of things would be going right for the Georgia offense. And Gilbert, I'm not going to deny or try to throw any douse any sort of luster there on Gilbert and what his talents are. I've probably seen him about 50 times in my 4 or 5 years watching him, and every time he looked like, even on a very competitive field, he even looked like one of the very, the elite 2 or 3 guys on every field I saw him on. Now, it got a little different when I saw all these guys at the opening way back in July, couple summers ago now, it feels like. But, that was when everybody stood out. The Elias Rick stood out. All the tight ends stood out. You took me back in the Wayback Machine a little bit there when you mentioned Tyler Catalina. I think it's a good snapshot of where Georgia is now, where instead of having to bring in I think he was second team all-conference at Rhode Island to play tackle in the SEC. Now you've got likes of Amarius Mims, Broderick Jones, Warren McClendon, Jamari Salyer, Xavier Truss to choose for your other starting tackle spot this year.
And it's kind of funny you bring that up. A, I didn't imagine we'd be talking about Tyler Catalina on today's show either. But B, I do want to get into some of these offensive line names before we're done with our conversation. It's On the Road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentel here today. And as I told our audience before you came on, I do want to spend a good bit of our time talking about Terrion Arnold for a couple of reasons. You mentioned some of the stuff that he's put out there on Instagram as of late. If we believe that following the visits is a hard and fast science, I would say that gear is pseudoscience. It's incorrect as often as it is correct. I can make a laundry list of all the guys I've seen spend a large portion of their senior season decked out in UGA stuff. Mason Smith, most recently, who seemed to be photographed wearing a Georgia t-shirt 60% of the time, and he obviously ends up not coming to UGA. So I don't know how strong I take any kind of gear reference by a recruit, but obviously this has kind of gone down to the wire when it comes to Terrion Arnold. We talked about Arnold to start off our week here on our program. So kind of tell us where things stand with, really, as far as I know, about the only name left for Georgia here for this 2021 class.
Yeah, let me first, Braden, let me try to get maybe one of your first mind-blowing emoji looks right here. You talk about pseudoscience and hat sciences and everything else. I've been told by a couple of recruits that if you get photographed working out in a shirt, that's one thing. If you've got it on game day, that's another thing. Or if you're rocking gloves on a game day, it's another thing. But if you actually post the photos to your Instagram account, apparently that's some sort of sacred personal branding account that I've had a recruit tell me it means a little bit more when you're putting that type of stuff on your Instagram rather than just a random capture of you throwing on a shirt and going to go work out or going to a camp in. That's what's interesting these days about Instagram. Maybe Instagram is the fourth dimension that breaks through that. Follow the Instagram post.
But that's
maybe that might be something.
But with all due respect to these recruits, that's a little like pro wrestling kayfabe in that we also know that the social media troll before you choose the other schools if you're a real thing. They're not going to necessarily acknowledge that. I'm not saying that Terry and Arnold would ever do that. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that they may say, hey, if I pose for the picture in the gear, that means something. But we also see, and it's not typically acknowledged very much, that the social media troll of the hey, where my dog fans at, that typically seems to precede a choice of the other way from time to time, right?
Yeah, it's funny though. It's funny what you picked up on because I know your social media spheres of influence. Your gears are going to catch anybody wearing Georgia gear. You'll see it retweeted, you'll see it posted, you'll see it liked. But the thing with Mason Smith though, as I followed his recruiting for over 2 years, is it's kind of a blend of a lot of schools. He did wear a whole lot of LSU. He did wear a whole lot of from time to time other schools as well, not just Georgia. But I don't know, Brendan. I think you sit there and you laugh at it and you say that it's not scientific and it never really happens, but in your heart of hearts, Brandon, I'm sure you're encouraged by two things. One, that he was not wearing a Florida hat or an Alabama hat, and two, that somehow he has a Georgia hat in his possession that he can cock to the side for his IG profile pic.
That's a good point. So when the hat show happens on his official announcement, it's not going to be like Georgia's got like the gas station hat. Like that's like the one thing you're trying not to be is the gas station hat on the table for the commitment announcement. So at the very least, we know Georgia isn't that. And on a more serious note with all of this, Jeff, I think some of the reporting that you had done months ago on Arnold is actually really valuable because it would be very easy for a pro Georgia show like this one to kind of use anything at our disposal to make it sound okay for Arnold and Georgia in the wake of Charlton Warren leaving to go be Indiana defensive coordinators. A move, by the way, that we celebrate. We love when guys get promotions. That's a big one for Warren. But your reporting on Arnold and his close connection to Kirby Smart was done 5 months ago, maybe at least 4 months ago, if memory serving correct, that Smart was the one who extended the offer to him, that Smart was the one, according to your reporting and Arnold's own words, was contacting him 3 times per week, more than any of the other head coaches that were recruiting him at the time, a top 5 that included Alabama, Florida, A&M, I forget the rest, LSU maybe, I forget the rest, that the programs are really going after him. Smart was the most vocal of all those head coaches. And so what we said on Monday's show was, I have no idea where Terry and Arnold's going to go, but maybe Arnold unique among some recruits in that he may not be as hampered by the position coach departure as some other recruits might be because A, Florida's recently been in the same situation, and B, Arnold professed to you how close he felt with Kirby Smart going back months and months ago. So would you mind kind of just joining that conversation for a moment?
Yeah, you're right. For me, I kind of think of a mental inventory. I don't know. I've done maybe 12 interviews with Terry and Arnold over the last 2 years, and the quick word name game association with Georgia it's always Kirby Smart. I mean, it's really always Kirby Smart. I think I put up somewhere on one of our platforms that I think it was the forum.DawgNation.com for anybody that wants to join a really fun forum. But Brennan, I would say 5 times as much as all the other Georgia coaches put together, I've heard him talk about Kirby Smart. There's the connection about Bainbridge, both being from South Georgia. I think I go back to my, even before all this stuff got really crazy, I go back to my first interview with him, and it was like right after the Missouri game, way back in 2019. And Terrion said, Kirby brought him in. He was like the meet the recruit that got to mill around before a game, and he was in his office, and that was the first person Kirby spoke to before after he met with the team. Once everybody did the dog walk, and he's chatting with him. I think his uncle was with him. Family is so very important to Terry and Arnold. His high school coach tells me that basically every practice or workout he's had, he looks over and he sees at least 3 or 4 family members from Terry and Arnold's camp, always at every practice. That's how close-knit the Arnold family is, about 6 or 7 relatives in Tallahassee. But he told me after that visit that, Kirby, he said it was a 10 out of a 10. He loved it. He'd be back. And, of course, he came back I know at least one other time he came for the visit in August. He was in the truck bed. He enjoyed himself in downtown Athens. He liked it. Downtown Athens, we can just simply say it remained undefeated with Terry and Arnold. How much he liked being, kind of one of those, guys on the town as a Georgia recruit. And man, imagery like that still seems like so far ago to a different era. But Terry Arnold has long thought he was a priority for Georgia. Every conversation, even in the real early stages of the 2021 class, it would seem like he would be plugged in about, hey, Nyland Green's going to be big for that class. He would be interested to see what Nyland ends up doing. I think I laid it out maybe in our story and right around Christmas time, Brandon, where I basically looked at all the options. For me, it always seemed like it was Alabama, Georgia, and Florida from basically maybe when he was rounding second base in his recruiting. Alabama's already got 5 DBs. Florida's already got 5 DBs. Georgia only has 4. Georgia lost Nugget Warren. He told me after Nugget Warren did not maintain his spot and standing and sign with the Georgia class, that he felt that it was instant playing time available for him at Georgia. And then came the Tyreek Stevenson situation where he got even more wide open. I think Georgia thinks he is a special talent. This thing comes to my mind all the time when I think about Terry and Arnold. I followed the recruiting of Keely Ringo. I followed Tyson Campbell. I followed Tyreek Stevenson, Eric Stokes, Richard LeCount, all these mega important recruits for the Kirby Smart era. And I've never heard a recruit basically break it down about how much Kirby thinks how important he would be in the Georgia scheme. He's a guy that they could build the back end of their secondary around because he can play so many positions, cornerback, free safety, star. And he's physical. He's got all the ball skills. And this is what people need to really pay attention to if you're wondering, hey, this is a tooth and nail fight with Florida maybe down the end for an important recruit. Everybody knows, well, there's not a lot of juice here. A lot of people, it's been my opinion for the long time, but I'll even name drop the great Terrence Edwards again and a lot of other guys. They look at Terry Arnold, a lot of the guys I talk to, and they think he is a better version, a slightly bigger, more athletic version of Richard LeCount. And that's really the way I can end any summation of Terry Arnold and what he's worth to the Georgia football class for 2021.
That sounds like a player I'd like to see in Athens. That's a description. I was already interested, and now I'm even more interested. That's a player that I wouldn't mind seeing a part of this Georgia 2021 class. Speaking of some guys already in the 2021 class, I want to talk to you about them in a moment, the Georgia offensive linemen, and I think there's something interesting that needs to be said about that group. We'll get to that here in a moment. It's on the road. Assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentel here today. And listen, I love doing my job here on DawgNation Daily, but the most important job I have is to take care of my family. And one of the most important ways you can take care of your family is by making sure you're squared away when it comes to life insurance. Now, when you think of AAA, you may, like me, think of the legendary roadside assistance, something that I love having with AAA, but I also want you to think about what they can do for you from a life insurance standpoint. You need to find out about the life insurance options that AAA has available for you. And to learn more about this, it's very convenient. 3 different ways for you to get in touch. You can give them a call, 866-695-0222. That's 866-695-0222. You can find them online, AAA.com/life. That's AAA.com/life. Or just stop by and visit them at one of their AAA offices, and they'll walk you through all of the options available to you. You need life insurance, and AAA is the option you want to turn to when it comes to that. All right, speaking of options, Jeff, Georgia's certainly got plenty of those when it comes to talented offensive linemen on the roster for the upcoming season. And I've been watching the series of videos that you have been doing with our buddy John Stinchcomb, the great former Georgia offensive lineman as well, looking at Amarius Mims, Micah Morris, and I know there's one with Dylan Fairchild coming up, and looking at some of these guys. And Jeff, I would dare say this. I don't know if it's just, quality offensive line prospect fatigue or what, but I don't really feel like this group is getting as much talk as some of the previous offensive line classes that Georgia has gotten. But I love Fairchild's athleticism. He's showing that right now as a wrestler. Micah Morris, I think, is really quiet for some reason. His recruitment was quiet. Maybe as a person he's quiet, but I think that he's a really solid prospect. I'm not quite so sure Amarius Mims isn't as good as anybody that Georgia has brought in recently. In kind of going back and revisiting some of these videos, I'm just really excited as a fan about what Georgia has added to its offensive line roster when it comes to the class of 2021. And by the way, that's to say nothing of a guy like Jared Wilson, who I think also is to be mentioned in a discussion like this.
You know, Brandon, I tell you what, maybe this is the time of year when everybody gets their merit increases or their raises or whatever. Everybody sets their employee human resources goal. I don't know if I can do it, man, but why not we just set the carrot way, way, way out in front of the rabbit here? I've got to somehow find a way to get this fan base and yourself and your DawgNation Daily program interested in an offensive tackle for the 2022 class, man. I mean, I know you love it. I know you love the Monty Burns approach to recruiting,
Sure.
and hey, give me more, give me more, give me more. I'm really going to have a hard time saying Georgia needs this guy to come in and play right away. He's going to be very important to the future of the team in 2022 and 2023, considering what they've stacked up. I mean, it's almost embarrassing, Brandon. You think about what they already had with Sam Pittman and then what they've maintained these past two classes. I mean, Matt Luke basically went 4 for 4 with the guys he really wanted in the 2021 class. I think Terrence Ferguson might make it 4 for 5, but Jared Wilson highly undervalued. You've got Dylan Fairchild, All-American. We started out our profile series, Brandon, and the next one's coming up is Jared Wilson. But we started out our profile series and we went All-American, 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 and we went 5-star. We went top 65 recruit, and then we went top 100 recruit for your 3 offensive linemen, and that was on top of it's just stupid, Brandon, how you put the previous year with that with Chad Lindbergh, Cedric Von Prawn, and then you had Kate Ratledge, and then you had Broderick Jones. I mean, those are all top 150 recruits. I think you went top 10, top 40, top 50, and then you went top 145 with Chad Lindbergh. I mean, it's astounding what they've done in the past 2 cycles in terms of spackling in every need. You think about the positional versatility you'll get with a guy like Cedric Von Prawn and Warren Erickson in the middle, much less guys like Chad Lindbergh and Tate Ratledge that can swing from guard to tackle. It really feels like that unit. I know Georgia's going to sign about 3 or 4 offensive linemen because they're going to try to do that every year. But I mean, those guys are going to have to really work in practice to crack some 2 deep early on in their career at Georgia.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. So Georgia's going to need offensive linemen eventually. So you'll keep working on adding some of those for the upcoming recruiting cycles. Very quick before I let you go, because I know I promised I was going to try not to keep you quite as long as I did last week. Kind of give me just a quick catch-all synopsis of what's left over. You've had some great pieces this week at DawgNation.com. Impressive wide receiver kind of out there on the fold for Georgia. What else should Georgia fans kind of have on their radar? Class of 2022, whatever else. Just give me a quick snapshot thumbnail before you go.
Yeah, we talked about this on For the Hedges on Wednesday. I think right now, especially in the early stretches, the most important positions for Georgia to look for in 2022, those are going to be defensive line. It's going to be the outside linebacker spot. You think about it for a minute, Brandon, you might want to clutch your pearls knowing that by the 2022 season, the only current member of the Georgia 2020 linebacker room that would still be available would probably be Mikhail Sherman. That makes you wonder a little bit about the incoming depth when you see Chaz Chambliss might play defensive end. You see Xavier Sori might likely be an inside backer as well. Outside linebacker, running back, and defensive line. Those were the 3. I think 2 interesting stories. Emory Floyd, that's a guy that's safety. He's going to commit on May 7th to honor his grandfather. Great story there. Brennan, I can simply say he has Arian Smith speed at safety or slot nickel corner. That's how fast he is. Could even go faster. He wants to go under 21 seconds in the 200. That is amazing for a high school junior in his track season. And then a name, Brandon. I know you still fancy your wide receiver talk. Georgia, Kojo Antwi. This is a guy out of Lambert. He's a Longhorn out of Swanee. Really impressive receiver. I had a fun watch chopping up his tape about 2 or 3 weeks ago when I was really looking at him hard. We wrote about him this week, and Brendan, he's got those special wow plays all over his film. I looked at it, and there were no empty calories on his film. He's only 4 minutes and a half, but that 4 minutes and a half feels like the best scenes of Gladiator, all put together. He's making plays on screens, on bubbles. He's making plays catching balls across his body where he falls down on a route and then turns it into a 71-yard touchdown. And then here's the kicker. Really, he's got a top 8, but right now it sounds like a top 2. And somehow Georgia is in the ring with Ohio State for a wide receiver. Doesn't matter if he's in the state of Georgia or not. When you see Georgia in the ring with Ohio State for a wide receiver, that shows you how really good he is. He's a definite take for the Buckeyes as well. But you compare the pedigrees at wide receiver with what I think I looked at it. I think Ohio State has pulled up like 7 5-stars in the last 5 years at wide receiver, while Georgia just has the one in George Pickens. If you want to get creative with your accounting, you can make it 2 with Mecole Hardman Jr., who was an athlete, who was a corner, then he was a wide receiver. But they call it Zone 6, and they usually get all the 5-stars they want at Ohio State. And Georgia's in the ring really hard, swinging with Ohio State right now for a prize 2022 in-state wide receiver. I think they need to get a guy like Antwi, especially because, to me, I don't know if they got that 5-star type talent with what they signed in Jackson Meeks and Donnie Mitchell in the 2021 class.
I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, plus I'm in the process of letting you go, but isn't it amazing over the last few years how the talent level in Forsyth County has kind of risen? You were talking about a player there at Lambert High School, which is kind of on the Gwinnett border, but still in Forsyth County. Multiple elite prospects at West Forsyth. Obviously, Denmark's had a bunch of guys that signed college scholarships. It seems like we're talking a lot more about SEC level talent at Forsyth County now in a way that maybe like 10, 15 years ago we would have been doing that.
Well, I mean, if it's good enough for DawgNation Daily to move up in that part of the state of Georgia, it's good enough for all these parents and their prospects. You mentioned West, Dylan Fairchild, the guy we profiled recently on our DawgNation film series, but really West Forsyth also has Oscar Delp, an All-American tight end, who's, for me, you look at everybody Georgia's pursuing and you gauge the interest from all the young men that you hear about how much Georgia's after them, and Oscar Delp out of West Forsyth. It seems, again, Georgia's going to try its darndest to add another top target, number one target on the board type guy to the tight end room to go along with the thought of Georgia having an offense with a Darnell Washington as a junior, and then a Brock Bowers as a sophomore, and then an Oscar Delp on the field as well. I mean, man, that is a mighty sporty looking tight end group. That maybe had some of the wherewithal and quicks and movement skills of maybe some of the receivers they've lined up maybe 5-6 years ago.
Jeff, great stuff. Thank you for being here on the road, assisted by AAA here today. Hope you have a great Friday, heading into a great weekend, and we'll look forward to speaking to you back here on our program again very soon as well.
Hey, take it easy, Brendan. Everybody have a good weekend, buddy.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So I said I was going to keep Jeff for a shorter amount of time. I think I had him going just about as long as I did last week, so I guess that kind of is what it is. I'll just say this really quickly, and this has got nothing to do with Georgia. It doesn't even really matter, but it is kind of funny, if you're I think it's really important to note who you are going head-to-head for with players, because that, as much as anything, tells you how good a player is. Jeff mentioned the head-to-head battle between Georgia and Ohio State for the wide receiver. Ohio State's recruited the receiver position as well as anybody has. So much so, I saw where Chris Olave was coming back for the upcoming year. A lot of Buckeyes fans were nervous about that. Olave's a really good player, but coming back, they were kind of nervous. What does this mean for Julian Fleming, who they expect to kind of be like that next guy, and maybe Olave's return kind of puts a little bit of a ceiling on that for right now, or maybe a bit of a roadblock on that. So, yeah, no one has recruited the receiver position better than Ohio State has, and so if Georgia could go head-to-head and win right there, that's probably looking pretty good all the way around. We'll transition here to our SEC through, and as we do, let me remind you that this weekend, great chance to settle in with some friends and some Classic City Lager. It's an Athens original from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's a great tasting beer. It's a lighter lager-style beer, but there is plenty of flavor to go around here because that's what you've come to expect from Creature Comforts Brewing Company as it is. The great care they take for the craft brews they construct, and it's really like a craft-style lager, so you get unique flavor notes and all the fun stuff that kind of goes along with that in an easy drinking beer. It is just good cold beer. It's just something great to enjoy. So make sure you check out some Classic City Lager in 6 and 12-pack cans wherever you're doing your shopping here this weekend to get ready for the fun of the weekend. Go ahead and pick up some Classic City Lager. I promise, whoever you're serving it to, they're going to be really, really glad that you did. In our SEC through here, I want to hit on a couple of stories here really quick. Tennessee has hired an Tennessee has hired a athletic director, Danny White, the former UCF athletic director, now athletic director of Tennessee, and it's amazing how quickly the fortunes of all the stuff around Tennessee seems to change here. Everybody seems to be happier. They believe that whatever issues were at Tennessee. That was all 5 minutes ago. Now it's excitement about Danny White and what White's going to do here. Maybe he's going to proclaim a national championship in Tennessee the way that UCF did down there in Orlando a couple of years ago. Either way, look, I'm assuming that he's probably a quality hire. He's been around a lot, kind of bounced around a bunch. The big, serious blue check reporters all seem to love him. So, do with that what you will. I guess I just kind of find all of this interesting. That if White is going to be hired, it certainly stands to reason, and I do believe the conventional wisdom among the commentariat on this, that he's probably about to also hire a head coach there as well. And the assumption that gets made is, well, maybe he'll kind of look to someone that he's hired in the past. A name like Lance Leopold at Buffalo comes to mind here on that. And I just got to wonder, wouldn't it have just been easier just to keep – I said the keep Jeremy Pruitt thing yesterday, but if you're not going to do that, why not just hire Hugh Freeze? Why not just do that? And you got to think that it's someone like Danny White, that's probably not the path he's going to go down. I did think it was interesting that Greg Sankey made an appearance on Clay Travis' radio show this week and saying that the league doesn't have any kind of official prohibition on hiring Hugh Freeze. That'd be up for the member institutions to do on their own. That doesn't mean there couldn't be some back-channel discouragement of all of that, but Sankey did go on the record on that this week. As I've said before, I'm a believer in second chances. I think it's weird that there's some guys that we just kind of love giving second chances to, and other guys that those that control the takes and control the narratives that define what is acceptable thought in this sport, seem to want to exclude some people from second chances. I don't quite get what that is with Hugh Freeze. Of all the coaches that Tennessee could hire, he is the best. I talked about, fear a little earlier in the show and which coaches strike fear in the hearts of their opponents. I'm not telling you as a Georgia fan I'd be afraid of Hugh Freeze, but there is nobody that Tennessee could hire that right now other than Freeze would fear me at all, cause me to fear at all. So Danny White's got a big challenge in front of him. Right now, Vols fans are kind of happy about all of this, but obviously the results for what's going to happen next is what's going to speak to itself. And as I said before, I'm not quite so sure that just wouldn't have been simpler just to hire someone like Hugh Freeze and actually win some games in the football field and let the AD job kind of take care of itself. Speaking of hirings and speaking of offensive minds, Alabama has landed its next offensive coordinator. It's Bill O'Brien. This, it pains me to admit, is a power move. Much the same way hiring Doug Marrone to coach your offensive line, now hiring O'Brien is your offensive coordinator. This is just the kind of resourced strength that most college football programs can't dream of. In fact, I'm not sure that Georgia could have pulled off a move quite like this. Hiring Todd Monken, I think, was a little bit of a coup. He had been an offensive coordinator in the NFL before coming to UGA, but Bill O'Brien was a head coach. He's been a very successful college guy there as well. It's a big move for Alabama. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be bulletproof in terms of its likelihood to succeed, in that I'm starting to wonder if Steve Sarkisian and what he found at Alabama, if that wasn't a little bit special. Because we've made the comparison a lot between what LSU did the year before, what Alabama did this past season, and we all know that Joe Brady, the guy that orchestrated the passing attack that LSU had in 2019, that was clearly special because he's a coaching star on the rise, and LSU could not match that performance without him there for the 2020 season. We've assumed that Sarkisian was a little bit less than that because Alabama had been good offensively before he got there, but never had been as good as they were this season. And frankly, there may have been years when they had more measurable talent than what they had this year. Sarkisian just found a way to get so much out of it. So admittedly, I'm impressed that Alabama has hired Bill O'Brien. I think he's likely to work out pretty well, but there is a part of me that wonders, can you really match Steve Sarkisian from a year ago because of just how good Sarkisian was? It'll be worth paying attention to as the season progresses, and we'll make that your SEC through. On the way out the door here, let me mention both of Georgia's basketball teams. Lady Dogs last night lost a tough one to South Carolina. Gamecocks, one of the best women's basketball teams in the country. So for a Georgia Lady Dogs team that's been red hot, no apologies necessary for not getting it done against South Carolina. We'll see how they bounce back from that. As we mentioned with Coach Crean when he joined us yesterday, big win for the Dogs this weekend, trying to win 3 straight in the SEC against Florida. So good luck to the Georgia men's basketball team there. And speaking of those lousy, stinking Gators, this is the portion portion of the show, we would do our Gator Hater roll call and give away a golden shoe. One of the best photoshops that we've gotten. I'm going to show this to you on the screen. This is really funny. Ben Green sends this to us with Gator Hater with the Dan Mullen thing in the screen behind me on the set, the Darth Vader. You got Connor Riley showing up as kind of a Luke Skywalker. Both of us holding lightsabers. Notice the child from The Mandalorian over Eddie there. This is one of the best we've had. Good job, Ben Green. You're the golden shoe. We will see you Monday, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. That was really good. And on video, by the way. Time now for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Can we just see that one more time? This is very well done. First of all, I love Connor with the... is that the Anakin Skywalker hairdo or is that the Luke Skywalker hairdo there? Either way, I kind of like Connor with the flowing bangs coming down the front there. That looks really good. Open collar shirt, as is the want of many of the Star Wars characters. You got Darth Vader there in the screen. But the piece de resistance, the coup de grace, if you will, look at the child from The Mandalorian down there in the Gator Hater Eddie spot. Not to say we want to take Eddie off the screen there, but that's just amazingly well done. Amazingly well done. You are very deserving of the golden shoe winner for today. We've had a lot of good photoshops lately. That is a really, really good one. All right, and on video here, let's do our R.S. Andrews cool down. Don't forget, check out R.S. Andrews. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. Don't let any kind of issue related to something like that mess you up for the football weekend that's coming. By the way, Connor Riley joins us.
Yeah, some sad news here to report.
Oh, no.
Braves icon Hank Aaron has passed away at the age of 86.
Oh, my gosh. Mm-hmm. Do you know that's like 10, it's 9 or 10 baseball Hall of Famers in the last 12 months have died, which, I mean, it seems like a lot and a tough time for the Braves here. After Don Sutton's passing just a few days ago, we had not seen a lot from Aaron publicly lately. I did not know he was ill, but we had not seen a lot from him publicly. Just an amazing, amazing sports figure. And this is one of those guys where, you know, he hit the home run record in 1974, which is 3 years before I was born. I have no memory of him as a player. And a lot of his best moments as a major league guy were as a Milwaukee Brave. But when you go back and look at the numbers, it's really amazing that in comparison to some of the other great outfielders, the Willie Mays, obviously the Mickey Mantles, you know, you could put what Aaron did up alongside any of those, but it's almost like until he became the home run champion, he wasn't quite thought of in that same regard, even though numerically speaking, he definitely should have been.
One of the most consistently excellent players of all time. In his 23-year career, he made an all-star team 21 times.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There's been some talk about, you know, the Braves and changing their name, and with the passing of a legend in Aaron, some have mentioned theoretically changing the name to the Atlanta Hammers, which I think would be a very touching gesture to, I think, pretty easily the greatest Brave of all time.
Yeah, there's no question about where he stands in franchise history, and obviously for someone like me who wasn't alive during that time, it's almost difficult to even comprehend just the emotional toil that surpassing the home run record had on him. It's ironic that the home run record would be controversial for a completely different reason later on in a way that sort of favored Aaron. But at the time, as he was getting ready to surpass that, and obviously the racial strife that seemed to bring about, and the very classy way in which he handled all of that, something that no human being should ever be forced to endure. So in addition to being a truly great player, full stop, he was also a very significant figure in the world of sports in terms of the class, the grace, the dignity by which, you know, he kind of played the game with.
Yeah, truly one of the most, I know you mentioned most of his work came with Milwaukee, but as someone who grew up in Atlanta, I think one of the most iconic, if you wanted to have a Mount Rushmore of Atlanta, people that meant a lot to Atlanta, I think Hank Aaron absolutely has to be on there.
Yeah, for sure. So just sad times. I mean, you know, my dad obviously died a few weeks ago, so some of this stuff is hitting me harder than maybe it would have in the past. Like the Sutton thing the other day just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I did know he had been sick because he had not been doing broadcasts, he had not been doing things like that. I'm actually seeing this on the TV screen now. The cool tributes are going to start coming out to Hank Aaron. The Sutton thing hit me so hard the other day because, you know, I don't really remember him as a player, but I loved his broadcast. You know, great Braves broadcaster. Now the Aaron thing's going to be tough too. It's funny watching Aaron because I promise we'll talk Georgia football after this. He's the only one I know who had such a front foot swing the way that he did. You know, typically power swings in baseball, you know, you kind of, you know, rock back on that back leg and you get that, you know, kind of torque on that back leg. Aaron has a very front foot swing. It almost looks like a golf swing a little bit, the way that he swings with that balance on the front. So the Braves are good friends of ours around here. We obviously tout the Braves a lot on this program. They're one of our advertisers. And to the Braves folks who are listening and watching us right now, Connor, I know you join me in saying just a absolute condolences and just a really, really sad day for sports fans all over, but certainly Atlanta Braves fans as well.
Yeah, words like legend, icon, they feel small when describing Hank Aaron.
For sure about that. All right, let's make an awkward transition here and do some college football talk here before we get ready to let folks get going on their weekend. And I am glad to have all of you with us, and you can kind of bounce around and do whatever you want to here for just a couple of minutes, and we'll get rolling on after that. So, John Williams Adams says, bless Hank Aaron for sure. Epic Robinson says, my mother loved Hank Aaron. She watched him play at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. That's a cool thing to be able to say you did. One of the things I've not seen much video of, and I'd love to be able to do so, the Braves won the first year there was a division in Major League Baseball. The Braves won the first division. They won the National League West in 1969, lost to what you call the Miracle Mets in that year's NLCS, the very first ever NLCS. I have never seen almost any video of any of that. I'd love to be able to see that. I'm not really sure what exists. I'm a little bit of a uniform guy. The Braves uniforms in 1969 were incredible. A very cool looking uniform. I'd love to see more of that, because that's that's probably Aaron's best team accomplishment in Atlanta, was winning that division in 69. I'd love to see some more of that. Yeah, Hayes Calloway, yeah. Hank Aaron just announced a moment ago that he's passed away. Let's see what else. Oren Chile says he had great wrists. He really did. Really did. I love watching those old swings. Aaron's was a little bit different than some people's was, but man, he was a good one. When I was a kid, I used to watch, ESPN used to run those old home run derby shows from like the 1950s. I'm not from the 50s. I was a child in the 80s, but they would do these, replays of these old 1950s era home run derby shows. Great TV that was. You should find those on YouTube. They're fun to watch. And watching those guys swing against each other was really, really big. Tristan West said, he's kind of mentioning some of the all-time Braves. I am really proud. The Braves don't have as many World Series titles as obviously I wish they did, but I'll put the all-time Braves up against virtually anybody. You give me Murphy, who should, I think now it's starting to be, I think more readily accepted, should be in the Hall of Fame. Obviously Aaron from the generation before that. Clearly what came in the 90s. Like if you look at the Braves retired numbers, the ones that kind of ring the area there at Truist Park, there's not a dud in that group. The Braves have not stretched to retire anyone's number. In fact, they probably need to retire Andrew Jones, number 25. I'll put the list of all-time Braves up against anyone. Scott Harris says that's kind of cool piece of memorabilia. Noah Sheldon asking about Dominic Sanders. I don't know. I haven't heard anything from Dominic Sanders in a while. I'm not sure about where he is right now. A lot of folks giving those condolences to Aaron in the YouTube comment section. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things. We're all sports fans. I mean, clearly we're a Georgia football talk show, and, we focus on college football, but we also are just sports fans in general, and that's obviously a huge piece of news. Thomas Tyson, I guess, lives in Denver, was going to see the Braves here in Denver last year. Thomas, have you spent much time at Coors Field? Because that's a ballpark I'd love to be at some point in time. I've never been there. I'd love to do that. Love to do that. And as I said, it's been a tough run for Hall of Famers. I want to say we've had 10 have died since last April. A long run of pitchers, right? Bob Gibson and Whitey Ford, just Don Sutton the other day. It's been, you don't need for me to tell you it's been a hard year, but in terms of just a lot of all-time great baseball players have died recently. Randy Hall says, update on Dominic Blaylock. I don't have anything new to report other than what we've kind of said before, but that's also probably somebody that we should try to catch up with here at some point in time, or at least catch up to somebody who's, spent some time with Blaylock and kind of see how that recovery's going. I like this. We were talking about honoring Richt somehow earlier. I like Michael on this. He says, if we want to honor Mark Richt at UGA, How about something to measure the crowd noise between the hedges? Put up something with the former coach on it and call it the Richter scale. It's kind of funny that you say that because I used to kind of jokingly do something like that with my friends, because the thing I liked about Richt was in the early stage of his career, the first 5 years that we were talking about a little earlier, Richt did win big games. At Tennessee in 2001 was a very big win. At Alabama in 2002, a lot of big wins in 2002. But you kind of run through the thing of you go on the road to these SEC palaces with 100,000 fans breathing down your neck. Georgia was great in these really big games, and so that was kind of my Richter scale thing then of how big a game was on the Richter scale, because I kind of thought of Richt as a big game coach there for a while. It's kind of funny that that reputation really eroded the second part of his career, and I certainly hate that for all of us. But at the early stages, the big games were a big thing for Richt, and I would kind of jokingly describe how big the win was in comparison to some of the other wins that Richt had, and that was kind of my own Richter scale on that. But I think it's a pretty good idea. Matt Rugavina says, he obviously biased, but I love my Minute Maid Park here in Houston. Yeah, Minute Maid, I've not been there either, but it's one of my least favorite parks because awful memory from the Braves, I guess the 2005 NLDS there against the Astros, one of the worst. Just 20-inning game, whatever it was, came to an end. It's funny, it's like the same day the Falcons are playing the Patriots. You got both these games going to come down to the wire. It's just a total disaster for Atlanta fans. There have been a lot of those. Robbie Pearson says Munson's greatest call, hobnail boot against Tennessee. I've always said that Munson in 2001 is his own version of Jack Nicklaus, the 86 Masters. The Munson great calls had come years before. Here's a guy near the end of his career, but still, enough in his prime to really bring it. And his hobnail boot in 2001 was Nicklaus, the 86 Masters. Kind of a late career reminder of just how good this guy really was. And I was at that game, and I was not one of those guys that I just couldn't. I was too distracted to listen to the old radio headset, transistor type radio stuff. I never did that at games when I was growing up like that. So celebrating in Knoxville the win, you don't really hear about the hobnail boot call until like several hours after the game. At least I didn't anyway. And it was so much fun to realize this great moment that you would experience in the stadium had also had like this world-class, play-by-play call to go along with it. Really, really, really good stuff. Jeff Ingram also mentioning the Kentucky game from 78. That's one of the ones I grew up with. I've jokingly said before, and Connor always says, what are cassette tapes? But my grandfather used to play these great Munson calls on cassette tapes, and that was one of the ones, the game-winning field goal against Kentucky there. Rex Robinson, I believe, that kicked that game winner. You may tell me I'm wrong about that, but I think it was Rex Robinson on that one. Let me go back over to YouTube for a minute, then we're going to let y'all get out of here. Worm checking in. Good to have you here, Worm. Tristan West also remembering the Herschel Walker thing from Tennessee in 1980. That was a fun one, too. Silent Chaos asking about Julian Rochester. Yeah, I guess we haven't heard anything official on Rochester. And it's really probably Rochester and D-Rob, the only two ones that haven't officially said anything one way or another. I would say there's maybe a better chance that D-Rob comes back than Rochester. I just don't know. Cody Ledoux asks a good question. Cody's not a Georgia fan, I don't believe, but he asks a good question. He says, what do you think, BA, if Georgia misses the playoffs this year? Worst case, they lose the East again. Kirby on the hot seat or no? It's definitely not a hot seat situation, Cody. It's definitely not that. But it is fair to say that given the way the recent trajectory has gone, that Georgia probably does need to trend back up again, right? I mean, after having won the SEC, then kind of downgrade to won the SEC East, now to be downgraded to didn't win the East, Georgia needs to point that arrow back up for this upcoming season, and I won't hide from that. Cody, I think you're fair to bring that up. But let's say it's a scenario where, once again, Georgia's 10-1 or whatever. You go to the SEC championship game. You face a national championship level program. Just say it's Alabama again, just for the sake of conversation, and you lose that game in a nail-biter. I don't think that proves that Georgia's not going to get over the hump. It'll be awful for Georgia fans to live through again because they feel like they've been through that a lot. But to me, it's not an example of a championship window closing or anything like that. It's just an example of right now it's really hard to get out of the SEC. So I definitely think that Georgia needs improvement over where it was a year ago. And if it doesn't win a national championship this year, it does become fair to ask, well, when is it going to happen? Because there's obviously no season you can point to in the future where it seems like on paper things are obviously going to be better than they are for Georgia right now. All of that's true, but it's not a championship or bust, put up or shut up type year, I don't believe, for Georgia, because the fact I think that Georgia hangs around here now for quite some time. But Grundy says the media will turn on Kirby whether you want to admit it or not. They may very well, but all I can do is say that, and some fans may turn on him too. And listen, over the course of the last year, I've had my issues from time to time with how things were going with the program, as anyone might. But I actually feel like that Georgia ended the year, I feel pretty good about where things are. And I think that Georgia is transitioning its offense the way that it should be. I think that Georgia still has plenty of talent, which people can kind of mock if they want to and say that recruiting titles aren't the same thing as winning on the field, but it is a prerequisite, I would believe, for winning on the field. So the impatience will grow and expand if Georgia doesn't win big this upcoming season, but I don't personally believe it means the championship window is closing. But I think it's a fair question. I definitely think it's a fair question. No question about that. Brian Whitehead checking in. Yeah, we talked about the Aaron thing a good bit here. A very sad piece of news. Janelle Calvino says Munson dad's golf buddy. That's kind of a cool thing. That's very interesting. Pete Williams says, I'll never turn on Kirby, even if the media does. Pete, I think that's well said. Good stuff. All right, we're running just a little bit late. Actually, probably more than a little bit late. So let me go ahead and get ready to wrap up. Mark Drewy says, I was at Fulton County Stadium when Hank Aaron hit 7:15. That's really cool. Really cool. That's a very cool thing to be able to say you saw. Really, really good stuff all the way around. All right. Thanks for being here. R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Make sure you also check out the AJC, Atlanta News Now, AJC.com. No doubt there'll be lots on the history and career of Hank Aaron. I'm hoping what the AJC will do, and I'm sure they probably will, is kind of go back and look at some of the things that have been written over the years, like from the late legendary columnist Furman Bisher and some of the other things. That period of Atlanta history, I always feel like that if you really want to make a good TV series, I know there is an Atlanta TV series right now, but I think in Atlanta from like the 1970s, I think Atlanta was just a very, very interesting place to be in the 1970s. In some cases, maybe for both good and bad reasons. But what a very, very interesting time in the life of our city. And obviously, a lot of that did include Aaron. And I'm sure a lot of what you read online at AJC.com may reflect on some of that. So no doubt there'll be volumes and volumes of just a life like few others have been for Hank Aaron. AJC.com for that. There's also other things going on at the AJC here right now that I want to make sure you check out there as well. Continuing coverage of the coronavirus situation and the virus, I should say the vaccine rollout across our state. Also the Atlanta United coming out of the MLS draft right now. A little bit more on the start of the new Arthur Smith regime. Update on some of the concerts scheduled for the Atlanta area, too. You can check all of that out, plus 16 different things to do this weekend around the metro Atlanta area. It's AJC.com for that. Get your Atlanta news now. Thanks for being here for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that for you because they do all of that for us. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Thanks for being here for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Y'all have a great weekend. See you back here Monday morning, 10 a.m. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.